Welcome to episode 123 of the People's History of Ideas podcast. Last episode, we began our discussion of the resolution of the Ninth Congress of the Chinese Communist Party and the Fourth Red Army, also known interchangeably as the Gutian Congress or the Gutian Conference, by talking about the global significance of the portion of the resolution which was edited and published in Mao's selected works as On Correcting Mistaken Ideas in the Party. This episode, I want to start by taking a look at the resolution itself, as it was written in December 1929. The whole 9-part resolution is much longer than the article On Correcting Mistaken Ideas in the Party, which after all was taken from just the first part of the resolution. To give you some idea of the difference between On Correcting Mistaken Ideas in the Party and the full resolution, On Correcting Mistaken Ideas in the Party takes up just 12 pages of the first volume of Mao's selected works, 11 pages if you don't count the endnotes, while the resolution of the Ninth Congress of the Chinese Communist Party and the Fourth Red Army takes up 36 pages of the third volume of the Mao's Road to Power series. Also, there are some significant differences between the text of the first part of the resolution as it was adopted in 1929 and the text that was edited and became On Correcting Mistaken Ideas in the Party. The selected works text is, I think, clear in its meaning. Much of the language has been changed from the idiosyncratic expressions that Mao was using in 1929 into standardized forms consistent with usage in other documents circulating in the international communist movement. For example, as we will see in our discussion later on, in the 1929 resolution, Mao criticizes what he calls idealist views, and in Correcting Mistaken Ideas in the Party, the term that he uses is changed from idealism to subjectivism. For people who have been trained in the language and idea world of international communism, or who are in the process of being trained, since such training was, and perhaps remains, one of the major functions of Mao's selected works, this better describes Mao's meaning. And there are a lot of other examples of this sort of clarifying editing in On Correcting Mistaken Ideas in the Party. And if you aren't familiar with these terms, don't worry. We'll talk about the content of the resolution in a little bit here. But On Correcting Mistaken Ideas in the Party also does away with some of the concrete details that Mao gives in the text of the original resolution, which I think is unfortunate. I think that those details make the original document a richer source for concretely understanding what Mao was criticizing at the time and how he proposed to fix the problems that he identified. While the document is pretty long, I do think that there's a strong case to be made for going and reading the entire text if you can. There are two main reasons for that. First, the document helps us to understand how the party was actually functioning. Mao's descriptions of party life give the sort of details about how things were actually being done that don't make it into other kinds of documents or into most histories written about this time period. Especially given the huge historical and cultural distance that we're at from where the Chinese Communist Party was in 1929, these descriptions of Mao's are really valuable for supplanting whatever pictures we've unconsciously created in our brains about how the party was functioning with a more realistic picture. It's not uncommon for the literature on the history of the Chinese Communist Party to paint the party as much more competent and monolithic than it actually was, and Mao's descriptions of its functioning can be a powerful corrective to that. Second, specifically for people engaged in trying to change the world in any time and place, no matter how far removed from rural China in 1929, it can be a powerful document to read in that many of the behaviors that Mao criticizes are ones that recur in vastly different times and places all around the world, not unlike what we see in other classic documents like Lenin's What is to be Done and Mao's Combat Liberalism. It's the sort of thing where someone trying to change the world today could read some parts of the resolution and feel like Mao is speaking directly to their own experience. Of course, for the purposes of this podcast, I'm mainly interested in the resolution because of its historical significance in the development of the Chinese Revolution. It marks a definitive turning point in the political development of the Red Army. As we discussed in the last episode, Mao's own efforts at carrying out his line on how the army should be a politically engaged weapon of the Communist Party, and as part of that, how army soldiers should be involved in political work in addition to fighting, began with the Sanwan reorganization in 1927, which we talked about in episode 62. But with the September 1929 instruction from the Central Committee, the top party leadership gave sanction to Mao's way of doing things, and this became the overall official policy line going forward. In the Gutian resolution, Mao takes advantage of this victory to fully discuss the problems with the party's work in the army and how to fix them, based on a little over 2 years of experience of guerrilla warfare and of line struggle within the party over how to organize and use the army. The resolution is far-reaching in discussing the problems involved, both on the level of political line and on the level of concretely applying the policies in the real world. So, let's start getting into the document. The resolution has 9 parts. They're titled, The Problem of Correcting Erroneous and Non-Proletarian Ideological Tendencies in the Party, On the Problem of Party Organization, The Problem of Inter-Party Education, the problem of propaganda work by the Red Army, the problem of the political training of soldiers, special education for young soldiers, the problem of abolishing corporal punishment, on the question of granting considerate treatment to wounded soldiers, and finally, on the problem of the relationship between the military system and the political system of the Red Army. Let's start at the beginning with the part titled The Problem of Correcting Erroneous and Non-Proletarian Ideological Tendencies in the Party. This is how Mao begins the resolution. Various kinds of non-proletarian consciousness are very strongly present in the party of the Fourth Army and are an extremely great hindrance to the application of the party's correct line. Unless they are thoroughly corrected, the Fourth Army definitely cannot shoulder the tasks imposed on it by China's broad revolutionary struggle. The overall source of the various incorrect tendencies in the party of the Fourth Army lies, of course, in the fact that its basic units are composed largely of peasants and other elements of petty bourgeois origin. Yet the failure of the party's guiding organs to wage a concerted and determined struggle against these incorrect tendencies and to educate the members in the party's correct line is also a major cause of their existence and growth. Basing itself on the spirit of the September letter of the Central Committee, this Congress points out the sources, manifestations, and methods of correction of various erroneous tendencies toward non-proletarian consciousness in the party of the Fourth Army and calls upon comrades to eliminate them thoroughly." End quote. This paragraph serves to introduce the entire resolution, not just the problem of correcting erroneous and non-proletarian ideological tendencies in the party section. The paragraph performs a few functions. On the one hand, it serves as a reaffirmation of the Marxist concept that ideas have their roots in the experience of social classes. Building on that first reaffirmation, Mao also reaffirms something that the communists took for granted, which was that correct ideas, including those about how to go about having a revolution, corresponded in some way with the working class, although whether this meant that they flowed out of the lived experience of individual workers or just, in a sense, much more removed from the experiences of individual workers, corresponded to the class interests of the working class as a whole in having a successful socialist revolution, is left vague, and was at the time, in fact, very vague in the minds of the communist leadership. And on the flip side of that, incorrect ideas flowed from the influence of different classes on the party. In this sense, the resolution's introductory paragraph can be read as a kind of boilerplate reaffirmation of basic principles. At the very least, it was an adroit way for Mao to signal to the party's center and other leaders that everything that followed was written in the spirit of being in line with political orthodoxy. Now, one of the things that Mao is eventually going to be known for is the understanding that he came to that political line is more important than class origin in keeping a revolution actually revolutionary. And I think we can see even here how Mao was already moving in that direction, because the way he frames the source of the errors in the party as originating in the non-proletarian origins of the majority of party members differs in significant ways from the more mechanical way in which the connection between political line and class origin were often understood at the time by communist leaders in China and in the international communist movement more broadly. The first way that he does this is a very easy one to miss. He states that the overall source of the various incorrect tendencies in the party lies in the fact that its units are composed largely of peasants and other elements of petty bourgeois origin. The word overall at the beginning of this paragraph serves to put at least a little distance between class origin and ideas. It's worth noting that the word overall is removed in the selected works version, because in the editing process this was also noted, and Mao's ideas downplaying the importance of class origin in relation to political line were highly unorthodox even as he sat at the apex of party leadership when the selected works were put together in 1951. Mao then goes on to stress the importance of education as a way in which large numbers of people from non-proletarian class backgrounds can correct their errors. The fact is, if you read broadly in the literature of international communism at this time, especially if you read lots of Soviet or Comintern documents, there's just a lot of skepticism and, at best, ambivalence about the idea that non-proletarians can really remove the taint of their class origin. Anyone who's read documents from the various party purges of the Soviet Party will note the essentialism in regard to class origin that was prevalent. For an in-depth comparison, you can go back and look at the discussion of class origins and political line at the Sixth Party Congress, which we discussed back in episodes 101 to 106. Finally, Mao ends by mentioning the various erroneous tendencies toward non-proletarian consciousness in the party. Here again, Mao uses hedging language, which is turned into the phrase non-proletarian ideas in the selected works version. This is not just an edit to make Mao's language more straightforward. It also makes Mao's identification of class origin with political ideas much tighter than it actually was. Anyways, I can go on about this sort of thing forever. As we read through some of the document, you can see for yourself how Mao expressed his understanding of the connection between class origin and political errors and the recommendations that he made for fixing the errors. All right, the first section of the resolution, the one titled The Problem of Correcting Erroneous and Non-Proletarian Ideological Tendencies in the Party, has 8 subsections. The military viewpoint, ultra-democracy, lack of organizational consciousness, absolute egalitarianism, idealist views, individualism, the ideology of roving rebel bands, and the remnants of adventurism. Let's start at the beginning with the purely military viewpoint. A. The purely military viewpoint. 1. The sources of the purely military viewpoint. A. Low political level. In consequence, failure to realize the importance of political leadership and the fundamental differences between the tasks of the Red Army and those of the White Army. B. Remnants of the ideas of mercenary armies. Especially since many enemy soldiers were captured in previous battles, and these elements have joined the Red Army, they have brought with them strongly marked mercenary ideas, thus providing a foundation for the purely military viewpoint at the lower levels. C. The above 2 reasons have given rise to a third reason, namely, placing excessive faith in military strength and not trusting in the power of the masses. D. The fact that the party has neither actively paid attention to military work nor discussed it is another cause for the formation of the purely military viewpoint in some comrades. 2. The purely military viewpoint is very highly developed among some of the comrades in the Red Army. It manifests itself as follows. A. These comrades regard military affairs and politics as opposed to each other and refuse to recognize that military affairs are only one means of accomplishing political tasks. Some even say, when military work is well done, political work will naturally be well done. When military work is not well done, political work cannot be well done either. This is to go a step further and recognize military work as leading politics. B. They think that the task of the Red Army, like that of the White Army, is merely to fight. They do not understand that, in terms of the significance of its task, the Red Army is an armed group for carrying out the political tasks of the class. As regards its work, especially its work in China now, it should certainly not confine itself to fighting. Besides the one type of work which consists of fighting, it should shoulder such important tasks as doing propaganda among the masses, organizing the masses, arming the masses, and establishing revolutionary political power. The Red Army fights not just for the sake of fighting, but entirely for the purpose of conducting propaganda among the masses, organizing the masses, arming the masses, and establishing political power. Apart from these objectives, fighting completely loses its meaning, and the Red Army loses the basic reason for its existence. C. Hence, organizationally, these comrades subordinate the departments doing political work to those doing military work, and put forward the slogan of letting Army headquarters handle outside matters. If this line is allowed to develop, it would involve the danger of estrangement from the masses, monopoly of the government by the Army, and departure from the class stand. It would take the path of the Kuomintang Army. D. At the same time, regarding propaganda, they overlook the important task of the work of propaganda teams. On the question of mass organization, they neglect the organizing of soldiers' committees and the organizing of the worker and peasant masses. As a result, both propaganda and organizational work are abandoned. E. They become conceited when a battle is won and dispirited when a battle is lost. F. Selfish departmentalism of the Fourth Army. They think only of the main force and do not realize that it is an important task of the Red Army to arm the localities. This is cliquism in a magnified form. G. Unable to see beyond their limited environment in the Fourth Army, a few comrades believe that no revolutionary forces exist beside theirs. Hence, their extreme addiction to the idea of conserving strength and avoiding action. This is a remnant of opportunism. H. Some comrades, disregarding the subjective and objective conditions, suffer from the malady of revolutionary impetuosity. They will not take pains to do minute and detailed work among the masses, but, full of idealist illusions, want only to do big things. This again is a remnant of adventurism. 3. The methods of correction are as follows. A. Raise the political level in the party by means of education. Destroy the theoretical roots of the military viewpoint. Be clear on the fundamental difference between the Red Army and the White Army. At the same time, eliminate the remnants of opportunism and adventurism, and break down the selfish departmentalism of the Fourth Army. B. Intensify the political training of officers and men, and especially the education of ex-prisoners at the time of their enlistment. At the same time, as far as possible, let the local government select workers and peasants experienced in struggle to join the Red Army, thus organizationally weakening or even eradicating the purely military viewpoint. C. Arouse the local party organizations to criticize the party organizations in the Red Army, and the organs of mass political power, the Soviets, to criticize the Red Army itself, in order to influence the party organizations and the officers and men of the Red Army. D. The party must actively attend to and discuss the military aspect of the work. All the work must be discussed and decided upon by the party before being carried out through the mass line. E. Draw up Red Army rules and regulations which clearly define its tasks, the relationship between its military and its political apparatus, the relationship between the Red Army and the masses, and the powers and functions of the soldiers' committees and their relationship with the military and political organization. End quote. Okay, we've actually spent a lot of time in past episodes talking about Mao's and Juda's disagreement on the issues dealt with in the section on the purely military viewpoint, so I don't think that I have a lot to add to what we've already discussed in past episodes. Let's just take what Mao wrote here in this resolution as kind of the resolution of that line struggle between him and Juda on this point. Let's move on to the next section, ultra-democracy. B. Ultra-democracy. 1. Since the party of the Red Army accepted the directives of the Central Committee, there has, indeed, been a great decrease in the manifestations of ultra-democracy. For example, party decisions are now carried out fairly well, and no longer does anyone bring up such slogans as applying democratic centralism from the bottom to the top, or letting the lower levels discuss all problems first and then letting the higher levels decide. These are facts. Actually, however, this decrease is only superficial and does not in any way mean that ultra-democracy has already been fundamentally eliminated from the ideas of ordinary party members. In other words, the pernicious root of ultra-democracy is still deeply planted in the hearts of many comrades. Various expressions of reluctance to carry out party decisions are a proof. 2. The methods of correction are as follows. First, in the sphere of theory, eliminate the roots of ultra-democracy. To begin with, it should be pointed out that the danger of ultra-democracy lies in the fact that it damages or even completely wrecks the party organization and weakens or even completely undermines the party's fighting capacity, rendering the party incapable of fulfilling its fighting tasks and thereby inevitably leading to the defeat of the revolution. At the same time, it actually helps prolong the reactionary life of the ruling class. Next, it should be pointed out that the source of ultra-democracy resides in the individualistic aversion to discipline of the petty bourgeoisie, small peasant production, and small-scale capitalism in the cities. When this individualistic aversion to discipline is transmitted into the party, it develops into ultra-democratic thought in the political and organizational domains. Such thought is utterly incompatible with the fighting tasks of the proletariat. Objectively, it is really a kind of counter-revolutionary thought. Unless we work hard to correct it and to prevent it from developing freely, people with such ideas will certainly take the road of counter-revolution. Second, in the sphere of organization, rigorously enforce democracy under centralized guidance. This should be done along the following lines. A. The leading organs of the party must offer a correct line of guidance and find solutions when problems arise, in order to establish themselves as centers of leadership. B. The higher organs must be familiar with the situation in the lower organs and with the life of the masses, so as to provide the social source for correct guidance. C. No party organ at any level should make casual decisions. Once a decision is reached, it must be firmly carried out. D. All decisions of any importance made by the party's higher organs must be promptly transmitted to the lower organs and to the mass of party members. The method is to call meetings of activists or general membership meetings of the party branches or even of the columns when circumstances permit, and to assign people to make reports at such meetings. E. The lower organs of the party and the mass of party members must discuss the higher organs' directives in detail in order to understand their meaning thoroughly and decide on the methods of carrying them out. End quote. As we saw in episode 120, the 8th Party Congress of the Fourth Red Army got bogged down with endless discussions as a result of ultra-democratic practices. What I find really interesting is that the problems with ultra-democracy at that Congress came out right at the time when the purely military viewpoint was ascendant, during that period between when Mao was removed from the leadership of the Front Committee and before the September instruction arrived from the party center. One typically associates the purely military viewpoint with the problem of commandism, that is, giving orders and expecting people to carry them out, regardless of whether they understand them or politically agree with them or not. Certainly, in my own experience and research, when I've had the opportunity to speak with members of non-Maoist armed groups, like the various groups which referred to themselves as political military organizations that back in the 1980s and 1990s were not so uncommon in Latin America, the people who I've spoken with who were with these groups would emphasize the fact that armies could not be democratic at all and use this to justify a high level of commandism and even an isolation of their military cadres from the sort of political dialogue that these groups sought to promote as part of their political activities. I think the fact that Zhu De and the other parts of the Fourth Red Army military leadership fell into this ultra-democratic way of functioning, however problematic it may have been for actually getting things done, speaks to the fact that these people had a real commitment to egalitarianism. Mao's criticism has more to do with finding some form of compromise between having a functioning army and having, to the degree possible, democratic ways of functioning within the army and party. It's no surprise that the form that he falls back on to fix the problem is to implement democratic centralism, which, after all, was the standard way that Leninist parties were supposed to function. But it speaks to his experience that he's able to give concrete guidance on steps to actually implement a democratic centralist way of functioning in the party, rather than leave his criticism at the level of ultra-democracy is bad, democratic centralism is good, so let's do democratic centralism. Principles are simple to uphold in words, but concrete guidance on how to actually implement them in the real world can be very hard to come by. All right, that's it for now. Next episode, we'll make some quicker progress through the parts of this resolution that we're going to read. Until then, be well.